Welcome to Hochoka Podcast.
What do Jesus, the ancient red heifer ceremony, white buffalo calf woman, and black elk have in common? More importantly, what deeper connections between Lakota spirituality and Catholicism does this reveal? Let's find out. Hello, Madaki Api, and welcome to Hochoka, here at the center of St. Joseph's Indian School's campus. I'm Scott Wooster, your Hochoka host. We're glad you joined our circle with Dr. Damian Costello, a frequent guest who joins us today to bring another fresh perspective on Catholicism through an indigenous lens. Welcome, Damian.
Thank you, Scott.
We have an interesting one today.
We do.
So we're going to make a connection today between, among, maybe is a better way to put it, the red heifer, which is new to me, so I'm learning all sorts of things about this, black elk, and the white buffalo calf. Okay? First question for you is, what on earth? What gives?
I don't know. At least I didn't know when I first discovered this. I was just, this Lent, I was reading my Bible. I'm like, you know what? I have to understand the Old Testament better. All these animal sacrifices. Mm-hmm. They're sacrificing animals all around. Mm-hmm. They didn't talk about this to me very much when I was growing up as a Catholic, and so I wanted to understand it better. And I got to the red heifer ceremony, nothing I had ever heard of before.
Okay.
And so I was intrigued. I looked it up, and it turns out that it's like this global phenomenon in certain circles right now. It's a ceremony that's only been performed, they say, 9 times in the history of the world.
Right.
And they may do it again in the coming years, maybe even after we do this episode.
Okay. And so it's something that you've never heard of. You just were struck by it as you read through, you found it, and you decided to delve into it more and found out that you're missing the boat, maybe, or had been missing the boat, or I'd been missing the boat,
well,
or
our
viewers.
The boat.
Yeah.
To be honest, this is an important part of Jewish tradition, of the law, and it has deep correlations with Lakota spirituality, mm-hmm. indigenous traditions, yep. And I think particularly in a place like St. Joseph's Indian School, it's something very important for us to think about when we think about where these two traditions intersect.
Okay, and that's one thing that you and I always like to do when we come in here is break down those connections and the differences between the two. So I get why it sparked your imagination, and I, of course, didn't know anything about the red heifer ceremony. What comes to my mind, or what I think about, and also what came to your mind, is the white buffalo calf woman, or as we said, Tesawia, right? Or the woman who brought the sacred pipe to the Lakota people. Can you tell me a little bit about that ceremony in your own words?
Sure. And I think our listeners would be more familiar with this. How the Lakota people, when they first came out into the plains, struggled. They had a tough time spiritually in a new environment, and white buffalo woman came to them, gave them the gift of the sacred pipe, which in it contained the 7 sacred ceremonies, mm-hmm. right? The Sundance, the Inipi, Vision Quest, and the others. And through these ceremonies, it taught the people to live like relatives with all the beings around them in this beautiful land, and most importantly, the buffalo. Mm-hmm. And so the story goes, after she gave the sacred pipe to the people who were gathered in the sacred circle in the teepee, she left. She walked to one of the hills, and she lay down and she rolled in the earth 4 different times and changed into 4 different colored buffalo, including a white buffalo, before disappearing over the hill. And so we know her as White Buffalo Woman ever since.
It's a very sacred thing when a white calf is born, and it happens infrequently. Maybe not as infrequently as 9 times with the red heifer ceremony across the history of written history, or history as we know it, but it's such a special and rare occurrence when a white buffalo calf is born. So maybe you can speak to that a little bit too.
I think you saw the news that in April 2024 there was a white buffalo born in central Texas.
Yep.
And as you said, when that happens, the indigenous world takes notice. Mm-hmm. It's a very sacred event.
Yep.
There is something unique about a different colored animal, particularly white, right? That we see as a sign from the spirits.
Right.
That the white buffalo woman is still here working among us on this land.
So, as a guy who grew up Catholic, studied the Bible, knew about animal sacrifices, these kinds of things happened. And I suppose as a little kid kind of wondered, why would they take an animal, or even a kid sometimes, or a human, to the top of a mountain and sacrifice it? I'd never heard about red heifer. This was not any of my learning. What did you find out?
Well, first of all, I think we have to do a lot of work to sort of get us into a space where we can appreciate animal sacrifice. The irony is that we actually kill a lot more animals these days than the ancient Israelites.
Okay.
Right? Literally tens of thousands a day are killed. It's just not a sacred event for us. It's a matter-of-fact sort of secular event that we need for survival.
Right.
In this context, people understood that to take the life of an animal was a really big thing to do. And so you made that sacred by offering it to God and the spirits. And so the thing that we particularly lose is that the idea of sacrifice was not to sort of appease an angry God. Like, God is angry at us, and so we've got to kill something in our place to make him not so angry. The idea is that blood is life itself. And by offering that, you actually draw God close to you. So that the word in Hebrew means to draw near. So when you sacrifice, you're attracting God to you. And this is even clearer when you offer incense. Incense, like smudging, was considered to be a sacrifice. And the word in Hebrew means to bind. And so that the idea is that you're binding yourself to God through sacrifice.
Yeah.
And so this is the central part of the Old Testament, the Jewish tradition. And at the temple, you would offer sacrifice day after day after day. The red heifer was a little bit unique in that it was not done in the temple.
Right.
It was done outside the temple. Now, to back up just a little bit, this is the last ceremony that's given to the Israelites before they entered into the Promised Land. And this is also like the Lakota people who received the sacred pipe, or given the sacred pipe in a time of conflict. What's bigger conflict than escaping slavery, right? And the struggles that they had living in the desert, constantly rebelling against God, complaining about what they had to eat. There's not enough water. If we could just be back in Egypt, over and over and over again. And so these teachings, these ceremonies are given to people so that they may live like relatives, so that they may live in the land that God is giving them. That's said very clearly to Moses. So the red heifer ceremony, like the white buffalo, you have to have a pure colored animal. In this case, if you have more than 2 hairs that aren't red, it disqualifies the
Really?
animal.
Okay.
And so there's this whole process of examining this. It's a 2-year-old female cow that hasn't been given birth yet, has not worked at all, right? If you even put your coat on it for it to carry it, it disqualifies it, right? So this has to be kept extremely sacred by all these different standards.
Right. What I'm seeing are all these parallels, but what I'm not totally entirely seeing is how the people. So they're desperate. They're looking for something to come and save them. They're fleeing. They're struggling. How did this come to them? I mean, you don't just out of the blue go, "Hey, I think we got to find the reddest animal we can find, and it can't be yoked," and all these kinds of things. How did that message come to them? What did that look like?
Very much like in Lakota spirituality. We know in Lakota context, you humble yourself before the spirits. You offer yourself. You fast. You pray. You suffer. You go to the mountaintop, and the spirits have mercy on you and give you gifts of power, which you bring back to the people. And you teach them, and they often entail new ceremonies. Well, that's exactly the story of Moses, of escaping his life of luxury in Egypt, going to the wilderness, humbling himself, and this constant repetition, and going to the mountaintop before God, and God having mercy on him and giving him these ceremonies and bringing him back to the people. Now, in this particular case, the red heifer was given, again, we always want to think this is about sin, right? We got to get rid of the sin. In this particular case, it's not about sin at all. It's about purifying the people after contact with death. In the Hebrew context and in a lot of indigenous contexts, all ceremony is about life, full flourishing in this life right now, extending into the next life. And contact with death was understood as something powerful that took away from your life force, that needed to be purified. You needed to be cleansed of that contact. And so the red heifer was sacrificed in order to heal people who had been made contact with death, so that they continue in ceremony, so they could go back to ceremony.
Okay. And why outside the temple?
All right, so that's another unique thing. All these other animals were sacrificed at the temple or beforehand at the tabernacle, which was a traveling version of the temple. We don't know a lot of these answers why.
Right.
So I'll just back up and say that. So King Solomon, for example, said, I understand all of the law. There are 613 teachings of the law, according to the Jewish rabbis. He said, I understand them all, except the red heifer. There are so many things about this that make it different. Mostly, sacrifices were of males. This was a female.
Yep.
This is the only one that had a specific color ascribed to it. This is the only one that was taken outside of the temple. Now let's talk about where it happened, and that might shed a little bit of light. It's taken to the east, right? Just like in a lot of sweat lodge traditions, the fire is in the east, or I should say the doorway is in the east, facing the rising sun. Teepees are constructed that way. The fire is built there. The red heifer is sacrificed. And unlike other sacrifices, which were eaten, this was burned entirely.
That's right, yeah. Yep.
And very interestingly, our Lakota friends will understand this or pick up the parallels. You throw a couple things into the fire. You throw cedar, you throw hyssop, which is a sacred herb, and you throw red cloth into the fire. And you burn it all up, and when it's consumed, you take its ashes, you gather them, and you take spring water. It has to come from a spring. And you put a little bit of ashes in that spring water, you mix it up, and sprinkle it on the people. And that purifies the people. That allows them to re-enter into ceremonial life.
One thing that you always bring here is you're able to flip things around, and we banter back and forth and help to make sense of those kinds of things. Some people want to say that Lakota spirituality is like Christianity, that they're the same thing, or that they can be blended completely. But you look at it a little bit of a different way. What does Lakota spirituality help us see in Catholicism that we may have missed?
Yeah, I think that's really the key in a lot of these uncertainties or things we don't understand about our faith, but particularly the red heifer, which people for centuries have said, we have no idea why God told us to do this, but because God told us, we should do it, and so we're going to. If you flip it around and you start in the Sundance Circle, for example, where people offer their flesh so that the people may live, so the buffalo will become our relatives, it makes this whole ceremony make a lot more sense. And particularly when you interpret it through Christ. And so the early Christian fathers, church fathers, saw the red heifer like a lot of things in the Old Testament and said, oh, well, this is foreshadowing Jesus. This is an example of what Jesus will do, and Jesus fulfills this ceremony. And there's actually a lot of very interesting parallels there. So where this would occur outside the temple to the east is the Mount of Olives, which is where the Garden of Gethsemane is. And if we know, our catechism and our teachings well, we know that Jesus suffered there. He was in such anguish that he sweat blood. So he literally turned red, if we take that seriously. And the Bible actually refers to the ashes of the red heifer. This is in the book of Hebrews, and says, if the ashes of the red heifer, if the ashes of heifers can purify us, so much more can Jesus. And then some early church fathers like St. Augustine, for example, said very directly, Jesus is the red heifer. So there's this idea that Christ's suffering is more perfectly understood when you look at this very indigenous-like ceremony that on the surface doesn't make a lot of sense, but that brings up a lot of connection and teachings to the earth and connecting to it, which I think what has attracted us to Lakota spirituality.
And you, as you're saying all of this, even in the name of red heifer, red is so powerful in both Catholicism or Christianity, but also in the Lakota culture, in that if you're asking for help, you're doing it with red cloth. If you're making prayer tobaccos, help, or as you would say, wichozani na wohiki, for health and help, you would use red cloth to tie up your tobacco ties. You talked about it with the piercing at the Sundance, which is, maybe the highest offer that a male can give. And, we don't even need to mention that childbirth, that sacrifice, or even a woman's menstrual cycle, those things. We're talking about red, we're talking about blood, all those kinds of things. The parallels of life and all those things are all wrapped up into one. Am I seeing that right?
Scott, you're absolutely right in making those connections, and the Bible does as well. We don't see this because it's been translated out of the Hebrew into our language, but in the original Hebrew, the words for earth, blood, red, and Adam, as in the first human being, have the same root.
Okay.
It's the same word that connects all of these together. And so when you talk about a red heifer, you're talking about the earth, blood, Adam, all together. And of course, we call Jesus the new Adam.
Yeah. And I love the idea that two guys this far ahead with, we're looking back in hindsight, trying to figure out how all these things are connected. And we talk about it all the time. We weren't living on the land. We didn't live with all those things where, like the four things you just said, the Hebrew root of all those things is all connected. And they knew it, they lived it, and they understood it in a way that obviously you and I never will or could never hope to. And that for me I think is pretty fun to geek out over, no matter what. That idea that they were living on a whole different plane and understanding it in a way that we never can.
Though I think, we are on the journey to recovering that, right? To the best of our ability. And I think, the first story, or the first person that brought me on a Hochoka podcast was Nicholas Black Elk. Right? We've both been very impacted by his teachings and his life. I think he understood this on a very deep level through his visions, because he had these visions that combined all of those themes together. As a 9-year-old boy in his great vision, there was a red man who gave him sacred medicine, hid the herb that became his healing herb. And in his vision, he falls to the ground, he rolls on the earth, and he turns into a buffalo. Combining all of these different themes: earth, blood, medicine, and horned animals. And then later in his life, in his ghost dance, he had another vision of Wanikia, he who makes live, right? Who that's the word for Jesus, for Savior in the Lakota language, right? In the Catholic context. He appeared as a red man. And in that vision, Black Elk was taken up over the promised land where there was buffalo. The buffalo had returned, and it would give him, he was given sacred power to help the people to be like the buffalo, right? To bring back the old ways, the old power. And he made a very sort of deep connection between the Wanikia in his ghost dance vision and that red man in his original vision. All of these themes in his visions that he had mostly before he'd even encountered anything to do with Christianity.
So what does that mean for now? We've had 9 showings of the red heifer that we know of, that we're aware of, right? That what's the buzz about number 10 now?
Well, there's a lot of interest in the red heifer in terms of, if you want to build another temple in Jerusalem, one thing you need is people who have been purified through the sacred water and the ashes of the red heifer. And so people who are interested in that, who tend to be Orthodox Jews and Zionist Christians, have been looking for a red heifer. And so they found, it's an interesting story, the whole process, but in Texas about 3 years ago, some pure red heifers that have since been shipped to Israel. Now, we should also recognize that there's a lot of conflict in Israel and Gaza and then in the Middle East right now. Tensions are very high. And so a lot of people take this as, a threat to the mosque that is now located where the temple was. I think the indigenous perspective can help us frame this in a proper way, right? That it's not about, whose temple is bigger, which temple belongs, but that God is with us and he works through the earth. Like, you look at all these different traditions that have this association between horned animals and God and God's presence. We see it out here on the plains, and Catholics came among many, and at best we're uncertain, but often very antagonistic and belittling of these traditions. And we actually now look at our own and say, it's at the core of our own tradition, at the Catholic tradition. It is mysterious, but it's emerging from the earth, I think, and calling us back to be children of the earth in a way that we always had been, and I think are still yearning to be.
So again, like I said, this is not something that I had any knowledge of until you wrote about it. It wasn't something that you had knowledge about, obviously, until a couple of months ago. But I think it's always kind of fascinating, and I think you do too, to take that knowledge in, to look at those connections and kind of see where that goes, and to see what pieces of this might be able to guide us a little bit. And so we'll continue to do that, and we hope our viewers continue to do that. But we appreciate, yeah.
Well, and I would just say, this is a very unfinished story, not just in terms of what we may learn about it, but in the world today.
Yeah.
This could happen tomorrow. This could happen a year from now. And the attention will continue to grow as we discern what this means for our future.
Yeah. And what can this do to help make this a better place and to make it better for our kids? And so, yeah, thank you for the knowledge. We'll continue to watch this.
Thank you, Scott.
For sure. And we'd like to thank our audience for joining us here at Ho-Chokeh at the center of St. Joseph's Indian School campus, where we talk about issues that are central to Native American education today. Until next time, stay centered.